12, this is C-20, message over. We have movement in the basement Alpha, should we proceed?
The DEA, along with Colombian special forces, are closing in on a compound located in the dense jungles of Colombia. Meanwhile, down the river, a secondary response unit is deploying boats and preparing to intercept and extract one of the most dangerous cartel members who have been hiding in dense terrains for weeks. He's preparing to leave the compound in order to move to another secret hideout spot. He never stays in one location for more than a week. He understands the risk and follows a strict protocol that has made it possible for him to stay undetected for years. However, this time it's different. The US authorities had received intel to the exact coordinates about his whereabouts, along with the level of security near the compound perimeter. And this tip did not come from any DEA undercover agents or any other intelligence agency. It came from one of his own members who had decided to bring the whole cartel network down that gave the DEA a golden key to capture this invisible drug lord no one had ever heard about, and this is how they did it. On the outskirts of Cordillera Occidental Mountains, a joint task force was preparing to locate and capture a high-ranking member of one of the largest cartels in Colombia. Operation window, just 30 minutes. Their organization had been so secretive that even the name of the cartel had stayed anonymous, let alone the names of its owners. The teams hop on the roaring helicopters and take off to penetrate the dangerous territory. Meanwhile, 2 more units were already moving into position along the dirt tracks, ready to block the compound's exit routes if the target slipped past the air assault unit. And even if the high-value target chose to ditch the road and escape via the river near the compound, a boat unit were in position to intercept anyone attempting to flee the scene. The choppers arrive at the landing zone, few miles away from the compound, and the troops disembark, quickly moving to form a secure perimeter for the operation. At the compound, the target has no idea that he's slowly being surrounded from every direction and has little to no chance to escape the hideout. Be it air, land, or water, his time has already run out. The forces carefully advance from all directions towards the compound while simultaneously gauging the positions of cartel security members. Their objective: to secure the target successfully without any violence. Almost at dusk, the forces silently move in, apprehend the 2 guards positioned at the compound wall, and wait. The primary target packs his bag, and as he moves towards his car to leave the compound, the forces quickly surround him and force him to surrender. Seeing so many personnel standing right up to his face and a hovering Black Hawk helicopter, he comes to the realization it's game over. The first domino has fallen. However, a very important question still remained unanswered. Who had tipped off the DEA about such a secretive location, a high-value target they could have never found without inside help? Because in the world of cartels, informants rarely last long. But this time, the insider was untouchable, immune to any threat, or so he thought. On September 9, 2009, at the port of Buenaventura in Colombia, U.S. federal agents along with Colombian customs officials raid a shipping vessel that had just arrived from Mexico. They intercepted the vessel and ordered the port authorities to open suspicious container boxes. The boxes were carrying thousands of pounds of a chemical substance called ammonium sulfate, a mass-produced agricultural fertilizer and a common food additive. Initial inspection yielded no success for the agents because the bags carrying the fertilizer were huge and they found nothing while probing them with sticks. Prior investigations revealed that there was an ongoing supply of narcotic substances from the port of Buenaventura to Mexico, which would ultimately end up north of the US-Mexico border via Mexican cartels' sophisticated logistical networks. And they were 100% confident the vessels marked as suspicious would be carrying illegal substances or money under the cover of everyday commercial shipping. The agents at the port, after a thorough inspection, cut open the bags filled with fertilizers, and they finally found large wads of money wrapped up in plastic bags. They seized the vessel and over the course of the raid found a total of $11 million. In the coming days, the authorities conducted multiple raids simultaneously at the Buenaventura port and ports of Mexico and seized a total of $41 million. However, surprisingly, no arrests were made during the raid conducted by the authorities. But the agents knew the money they found is obviously not legal and ties directly to Colombian cartels. But they didn't know who it belonged to. At a local cafe in Bogota, two men were sweating bullets after hearing the news that money vessel had been seized by the authorities. It's because these two men were the low-level operatives of an invisible cartel, and their only job was to secure the money package from the port and move it forward to their immediate supervisor. And because they had failed in securing the package, they felt their lives were in danger. Both men get in their car and go directly to a Bogota-based attorney who had a lot of influence in the political and law enforcement landscape. The two men, without any hesitation, admit that they are the money mules whose job involved securing the package from the Buenaventura port and move it forward up the chain. But they also added they don't exactly know who they work for and are only in contact with their immediate boss. However, after failing to secure $40 million, they fear for their lives. The attorney asks them should he consider this as their confession and would they like to surrender. The two men, who were obviously between a rock and a hard place with no safe exit, agreed to surrender. The attorney calls one of the leading assistant U.S. attorney based in New York and tells her that he has two clients who have confessed to a money laundering operation connected to a Colombia-based cartel and are ready to surrender. The US-based attorney already had the idea about the raids in Buenaventura and was able to connect the dots between the raid and the men who just surrendered in Colombia. Both the US and Colombia-based attorneys signed up an agreement with the money mules and ordered them to go back into the field and start working again as informants. Meanwhile, a few miles south of Miami, the U.S. Coast Guard received an intel regarding a series of suspicious fishing boats and submersibles that were allegedly carrying thousands of kilos of drugs for over a week. The U.S. Coast Guard, along with DEA agents from a nearby air station, loaded up their gear to intercept the fleet as quickly as possible. And sure enough, two fishing trawlers were quietly sitting and rocking in the open waters. U.S. Coast Guard intercept the boat and find at least 2,000 kilos worth of drugs bound for Miami. The men are arrested and are questioned by the U.S. authorities about the operation and who they work for. And the only answer they had was they know nothing about the operation, they're just drug runners and work for a man named Don Luis. Don Luis was a name that was never heard before in the history of cartel business. He was not in the books, no media, and nowhere near the radar of US or any other country's law enforcement. However, the DEA at least had a name to work with that might start with the letter L. Few months into the investigation, the DEA finds a name, Luis Caicedo. However, this name was very common in Colombia, and therefore it was very difficult for the authorities to associate this name to a cartel. After a couple of months, they found information that a man named Luis Caicedo worked at the Colombian Attorney General's office, and due to a scandal, he resigned and entered the Colombian cartel as a logistics master. His full name, Luis Agustin Caicedo Velandia. The DEA searches through all the records based on this name and finds a record of Luis Agustin Caicedo Velandia with his face on a visa application. And digging deeper into the investigation, they find that Luis Agustin Caicedo Velandia went by the name Don Lucho, aka Don Luis. The authorities finally had the intuition that they might have their invisible guy they were looking for all these years. However, the biggest problem was they had no idea where he was and how to capture him. The DEA and some of their undercover agents in Colombia were digging deeper into the investigation, and almost 6 months in, they found a man who went by the alias Max. Max was a high-level operative mostly managing the operation side of Don Lucho's cartel. And given his nature of job, he had to be on the front line exposed openly to the prying eyes of law. The US authorities received an intel that Max was a married man and frequently took vacations, sometimes in America and sometimes in Europe, for business and leisure purposes. A few weeks later, a flight that departed from Bogota was bound for Miami International Airport. And one of the passengers in the flight was Max with his wife. The DEA received the intel that Max, along with his wife, is traveling to Miami, and this could be their chance to gain access to Don Lucho's cartel world. 2 DEA agents dressed as passengers arrived at Miami International Airport a few hours before Max's flight was about to land. A couple of hours later, the flight lands and arrives at the gate. At this point, Max had no idea that his vacation would be over before it had a chance to even start. Max and his wife exit the gate, and as they are about to leave the airport, 2 DEA agents simply walk up to them and tell them that they are federal agents and he has to go with them. The DEA agents made sure they did not attract any attention at the airport. Their plan was to make it look like they were probably Max's friends or relatives, and therefore the agents did not cuff him and simply asked him to walk normally and get in their car. Max is brought in for questioning, and the first question he's asked who he works for, and Max replies, Don Lucho. The DEA finally had one of the most important links to the world of this invisible kingpin. The DEA gave Max only 2 options: either cooperate with the authorities or go to prison for a very long time. And Max chose to cooperate with the US authorities. The agents asked Max to lay out the entire network of the cartel. And Max tells the agents the cartel works on 3 important rules that can never be broken. No luxuries, which means that even if some of the members up in the hierarchy are making a lot of money, they cannot own expensive cars, luxury watches, and will have to live in normal houses without any bodyguards around. Number 2, dressing appropriately, which means every member has to dress like they are going to a corporate office and appear like they have a reputable white-collar job. No flashy parties, custom-printed suits, or anything that appears different. And number 3, never ever talk about the business to anyone, not even your wife or children. Following these 3 basic rules gave the cartel a much better chance in blending in and also helped them stay off the radar. Adding to the investigation, Max also revealed that the whole cartel is decentralized. Don Lucho has no business assets as such. Every single segment of the operation is outsourced to other cartels and their associate. Don Lucho is basically a puppet master who passes instructions to outsourcing partners. Basically, the Invisible Cartel does not own any labs, and they don't have any transport except for normal-looking cars for personal use. If they need to transport goods, they'll hire other cartel operators to fly out the shipment. If they need stealth delivery, they'll hire narco-submarines from other cartel groups. Even the tunnels near the US-Mexico border owned by other organizations would be rented for their deliveries. This had made Don Lucho completely anonymous, and he had been operating the largest drug empire in Colombia that was worth more than $24 billion, and no one knew about it. The DEA now had the clear picture how this billion-dollar invisible cartel actually operates, and now they wanted to know how to bring it down. Bogota, Colombia. A man named Ciaz in his house goes to his room and opens a laptop. On the screen, an email draft for a delivery to the US is ready to be sent. Ciaz reads the email but never sends it. He makes one phone call and leaves. And this email was the ultimate weapon the cartel had been using to stay undetected for years. If no email is received or sent and just sits in a draft, the authorities have no digital trail to track the cartel. And every high-ranking member in Don Lucho's network had access to the same common email with its password. And with the help of Max, now the DEA had access to their every move. With access to this email, the DEA basically gained the power to send instructions for cartel operations. And that's exactly what they did. In the coming days, the authorities started sending instructions to send a package to the US-Mexico border. A pickup truck unloads the package in a discreet desert location and is intercepted by US and Mexican authorities. They seized the entire package along with $5 million that was supposed to be carried back by the truck. Basically, the DEA was running the cartel, impersonating Max and other members from an undercover capacity, not only to seize the money and drugs, but to destroy it. However, the authorities were walking on a very thin line with this operation. If they issued too many deliberate instructions to send money and drugs in order to seize it, it would raise the red flag. But on the other hand, they really wanted to seize as much money and drugs as possible. After months into this undercover operation, the DEA was able to seize hundreds of millions of dollars and took thousands of pounds of illegal substances off the streets around the world. Until one day, Don Lucho finally got suspicious, and over the network he hinted that there is a mole in the organization because their operations have been running successfully without a single arrest while staying invisible all along, and suddenly they are getting frequently hit left and right by the authorities with all these raids. The email network starts to run dry, and some actual cartel members stop following instructions entirely. The DEA knew they cannot continue this operation of pulling the strings from both ends any longer. They have to find Lucho and capture him. The US authorities set up a plan to capture Don Lucho in Colombia. They sent requests to Colombian authorities regarding the capture and extradition of Luis Caicedo back to the United States. However, within a few days, the US authorities hit their biggest snag. Don Lucho had vanished again. Because Don Lucho had a lot of influence in Colombia, the information regarding his arrest was leaked to him from his sources, and he fled to Argentina. Fortunately, this time, Don Lucho broke one of his own rules: no flashy clothes and no flashy parties. Don Lucho goes to a party in Colombia before fleeing and befriends a person at the party who was in fact an informant to the US authorities. This informant brings the intel to the authorities that Don Lucho has moved to Argentina. The US authorities move quickly. They set a Max to go back in the field to find the information about his whereabouts in Argentina. Because Luis Caicedo had no idea that Max was working with the DEA, Max took advantage of it and started gathering information over the email about Don Lucho's exact location. And sure enough, they find him. Don Lucho was hiding in one of his mansions in a forested area near Buenos Aires. The US authorities fly out to Buenos Aires with the plan of setting up a meeting between Don Lucho and Max in a public area to discuss the presence of a mole in the network, and Don Lucho agrees to meet him. April 12, 2010, Luis Caicedo arrives at a small cafe in an alley of Buenos Aires. The authorities were already prepared, but there were no police cars, no tactical forces, and no blaring sirens. Just a quiet morning with an eerie silence. Don Lucho orders a coffee and waits for Max's arrival. However, instead of Max, two Argentinian federal agents arrive, cuff him, and take him directly to an airport near Buenos Aires. And as he was handed over to US authorities, he knew his gig was up. They put him on a private jet and fly out directly to America. The king had fallen, but the king's guard was still on the loose. Daniel Barrera, aka Loco Barrera, Don Lucho's cartel partner, protector, and the most feared and dangerous man in the entire Colombia. After the extradition of Luis Caicedo back to America, he had no option but to cooperate with the authorities. And Caicedo not only decided to cooperate, he had made up his mind that if the king has fallen, so shall be the fate of his entire empire. Luis Caicedo simply gave away the exact movement, date, and coordinates of Loco Barrera's hideout and suggested the authorities take as much toys and fireworks as possible to capture Barrera because they are going to need it. The DEA, along with Colombian authorities, created a special joint task force to find and capture the most dangerous person in Don Lucho's cartel. They fly out to Colombia, and on the outskirts of Cordillera Occidental Mountains, they prepare for his capture. Based on Caicedo's information, the team had a 30-minute window to infiltrate, capture, and extract Barrera. The team made a plan to execute a coordinated attack using all three mediums. They take off and move quickly to find and capture this high-level target. The choppers landed at the designated landing zone. Meanwhile, land and water-based units were closing in fast around the compound perimeter. The teams created a secure perimeter and started approaching the compound with caution. Loco was preparing to leave the compound. After the capture of the Kingpin, he had become very cautious and never stayed in one place for more than a week. He had been living in so much fear that he had burned his own fingertips to leave no fingerprints anywhere. Fortunately, on the day of the raid, the compound had only 2 guards who were apprehended by the forces easily. As Barrera prepares to leave the compound, he is surrounded by DEA and Colombian personnel with a Black Hawk helicopter hovering over his head. Barrera realizes it's game over. However, the authorities quickly realized the man they had captured was not Loco Barrera. He was a decoy set up by Barrera himself. They had captured a low-level operative impersonating Loco Barrera. The real Loco Barrera had fled to Venezuela and was later captured by the joint efforts of 4 countries in San Cristobal after his location was tracked by a tapped public payphone. He is extracted quickly from the location and is extradited back to the United States. In the coming months, Luis Caicedo revealed every network, every asset and stockpile he had to the authorities, along with at least 126 members of his own and other cartels to destroy everything once and for all. The billion-dollar Invisible Kingpin, who once owned the biggest unknown cartel in Colombia, became the ultimate equalizer.